Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between Russia and Ukraine. Specifically, today, we're looking at Bakhmut. We're starting in Bakhmut, rather. And we have a better idea of what is happening on the ground in Bakhmut, why the Ukrainians are still there, how they're holding on, but again, more importantly, the why behind they are still there. So it is even if the Ukrainians desire to conduct a tactical withdrawal from Bakhmut, and there are significant Ukrainian combat units assigned to this Bakhmut cauldron right now. If you look at the multitude of brigades, and we're going to just start from the west of Bakhmut, kind of the outer, what's keeping this cauldron open is you have 1, 2, 3 brigades to the west of Bakhmut, and then inside Bakhmut proper, you essentially have 1, 2, 3, 4 brigades, quite possibly a 5th, which would be the 3rd Assault Brigade, Azov. Now, the problem, again, for the Ukrainians is pulling these forces out in a manner that would not subject them to relentless and very, very precise heavy artillery fire. We know now that as the Ukrainians have tried to pull out of Bakhmut along these 2 roads that may or may not remain open, that the Russians continue to use, again, very heavy artillery, and they are also utilizing deployable minefields via artillery. So there are artillery rounds that you can use and fire that lay down minefields. And again, the ability of the Ukrainians to pull out of these areas is really conditional on can they leave safely. And the problem for the Ukrainians is they cannot leave safely, not at least in larger formations. We heard about a report yesterday, maybe the day before, a company-sized element of Ukrainian forces tried to pull out of Bakhmut. And that company was observed and essentially destroyed. I believe essentially half the company of about around 80 to 100 personnel were killed, and the rest were wounded in that operation to try to get that company out. They are trying to get out some of their more better trained and elite units, and unfortunately, it's going to fall upon the territorial forces, the quasi-conscripted forces that were civilians just a few months ago, to try and keep Bakhmut from being overrun by the joint forces of Russian ground forces, VDV, and Wagner formations. But that's the big issue right now for the Ukrainians, is they just can't leave. They can't get out. And they are, right now, we're watching the Russians very systematically and relentlessly destroy these Ukrainian units in Bakhmut. Now, we've heard about the Ukrainians deciding that they are going to move additional forces into the area near Bakhmut, possible counterattack, what have you. But again, right now, their number one priority, the Ukrainians, is to get their better units out of Bakhmut before this pocket completely collapses, and they don't want to lose units such as elements of the 93rd Mechanized Brigade. That's a regular Ukrainian formation, seen a lot of action. Even here, this National Guard unit, the 3rd Operational Brigade, the Spartan Brigade of the Ukrainian forces. Again, a fairly competent Ukrainian military formation that the Ukrainians want to see removed from Bakhmut before it's destroyed. And then finally, the 3rd Assault Brigade. that is also deployed very, very close. In addition, this unit too, it's kind of a strange unit to be on the front line, the 1st Presidential Brigade of the Ukrainian National Guard. Very interesting that is allegedly fighting on the front line near Bakhmut. But again, the issue right now for the Ukrainians isn't that they want to leave Bakhmut, it's the simple fact they can't leave Bakhmut. Again, you've got a road here, and you may have a road up here, if you can kind of see what well, I'm not going to do that. But anyway, that is the big issue right now for the Ukrainians. It's just getting out of Bakhmut. And that's a problem for them because they can't. And we're going to continue to watch this very, very closely. We anticipate that the fighting could continue for some time, or we could see things just devolve very quickly and the Bakhmut pocket completely collapse. But right now, there's still significant elements of the Ukrainian military in this pocket that continues to fight. They're not surrendering. They're continuing to fight. But again, their ability to get out of this situation is just something they don't have the capability of doing right now, outside of getting completely destroyed as they attempt to withdraw out of these very, very limited areas in which they can withdraw. But that's where right now, again, some of the most heaviest fighting is taking place. We continue to hear about both the Ukrainian side and the Russian side preparing for some sort of offensive operation in the coming months, going into summer, late summer. We hear about the possibility of a Ukrainian operation in the south, towards out of Zaporizhzhia south, towards Melitopol. We hear about the possibility of a Russian operation also taking place in the same area, or further to the north as well, near Kharkov, Sumy, Chernihiv. But again, at this point, we just don't know. And again, the Ukrainian side is keeping things tight to the vest. Obviously, a lot of what the Ukrainians do is based on the recommendation of U.S. generals, NATO generals. By and large, the United States is giving the Ukrainians a lot of intelligence and a lot of advice. And some people believe that that this war is actually being fought in a European headquarters someplace in Western Europe, or if not, the Pentagon itself. So again, it's going to be interesting as this war continues, as the possibility for escalation takes place. Again, I firmly believe that we will see the deployment of tactical nuclear weapons by the Russians against Ukrainian forces if the Ukrainians are able to threaten Melitopol and thereby threaten the Crimean Peninsula. I do not believe the Russians are willing to lose the Crimean Peninsula without the use of nuclear weapons. Again, I think before the Russians lose Crimea, you will see tactical battlefield nuclear weapons deployed. Now, are we going to get to that point? Probably not. It's going to be very, very difficult if the Ukrainians launch a counteroffensive in the south that is going to allow for an operation that is not going to cause significant casualties against the Ukrainians. Now, what is interesting, again, as we hear about these weapon systems being deployed to the Ukrainians, now we're hearing about the JDAM that is now actively being used, allegedly, by the Ukrainians. It's kind of interesting that that would be the weapon system that the U.S. would hand over, given the condition of the Ukrainian Air Force and its limited strike ability. So, smells a little funny to me. Again, you know my theory around the possible deployment of U.S. assets to include F-35s in this campaign. But again, obviously nothing can be proven as of yet. But we'll see. In the distant future, light tends to show, and eventually the truth will also show. Now, again, is it absolutely that the U.S. is using F-35s against Russian forces? Again, difficult to say, but it's something that I simply would not rule out. It's just something that right now I personally would not rule out. And does it mean that it's the U.S. Air Force that is using F-35s or F-22s against, not against, but in the Ukraine? Doesn't have to be. It could be CIA assets. I mean, look, the CIA has used SR-71s and U-2s. So to say that it is completely impossible that the CIA does not have F-35s as assets, I don't think you can rule that out. But again, that's kind of where we sit for today. I think this map really kind of gives you an idea of just the sheer magnitude and size of this conflict that we're seeing. I mean, we haven't seen anything like this in terms of the ferocity of fighting and the scale of fighting since going back to World War II. We just haven't. So again, as I continue to display my concern about the possibility that this could escalate and we could see additional possible actions by the Russians, it's kind of interesting right now how the United States is now, the intel community is now laying blame that the Ukrainians blew up Nord Stream. Interesting. I wonder if U.S. intel has gotten word of some sort of imminent or planned action by Russian intelligence against U.S. concerns someplace in the world. Difficult to say. But could it have been the Ukrainians? Yeah, you can't rule it out. Possibly. The Ukrainians could be capable of doing something like that. But again, I think it's more likely that it was a U.S. Navy SEAL operation that took down Nord Stream. So we'll continue to observe. We will continue to report. Thank you for joining us today. More to come very, very soon. Have a good day.